Hi, I'm Jennifer, and welcome to the Speech House podcast. Speechwriters are key and essential to shape the ideas and the thoughts of leaders and key actors of the world. Yet, they remain somehow mysterious, and people often wonder who are they, what are their background, and what are their own thoughts. And that's why I'm so happy today to welcome our guest, Dana Rubin. She's a speechwriter and a speech coach and a consultant. She has created the Leadership Communication Roundtable, a community of ghostwriters and speechwriters with over 6,000 members on LinkedIn. She's also a judge in the annual Cicero Speechwriting Awards. She's also a high school debates coach. And last but certainly not least, she's been a great advocate about empowering women and speaking more in public, and also to shed a light on women's speeches in history that too often have been forgotten. And she's the author of the book Speaking While Female: 75 Extraordinary Speeches by American Women. Dana, welcome to the Speech House podcast.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for inviting me. It's really great to be here.
It's a pleasure. We have so many topics to cover. I would like to start with your background. You're a graduate of Yale, and I also think that you were a journalist. And the question is like, how did you become a speechwriter?
Well, how did I become a speechwriter? How does anybody become a speechwriter? Um, I don't think there's any one way that people enter the field of speechwriting, but very often people have a background of writing, and especially journalism. A lot of people who are curious and are driven by curiosity, trying to figure out how the world works and then express it. A lot of people are curious about how the world works, but there's a difference between curiosity and curiosity that is followed by expression. When you understand something or get your head around something and then you have to shape it into words, there's a process that goes on, an intellectual process of coming to terms with something. So journalism is a really, really excellent way to introduce yourself to the world of ideas and expression. And then the jump to speechwriting is a natural one because journalists generally are writers, even when they're broadcasting, whether it's on radio, TV, or social media. They still use words, and they still have to compose words and use words to shape an argument. And that's really the same thing that you're doing when you're speechwriting. Speechwriting is a very writerly form of expression. Uses language, uses ideas, uses turns of phrase, uses literary phrases, uses structure of language and ideas, and all those are parallel to speechwriting and to journalism.
Great. And what was writing a big part of your youth? Were you like writing for fun when you were little?
Actually, yeah, I really was. I think I popped out of the womb as as a writer. I have a very early memory of standing next to my mother, and I was holding her hand. We were a Jewish family, and we were in synagogue, and I was holding her hand, and she was up like that. So how old was I? I was little, and we were talking to someone, and they were saying to me, "Your daughter wrote such a lovely thank you note." So what kind of a nerd was I that I really liked writing thank you notes? But I remember that I used to enjoy writing the note and saying all the different ways that you could say, "Thank you for your thoughtfulness. I appreciate your being so thoughtful. Thank you for thinking of me." I remember when I was, I don't know, just a kid, and writing those notes and playing with them and playing with all the different ways that you could combine language and words to express the same idea, but with nuances.
I can thank you for sharing that, and I can definitely relate to that. I remember when I was little as well. I The process of writing and storytelling was something fascinating to me, and I remember I think I was four asking my mom, "How does it work?" I was really interested in the way of creating stories, and then when I started to learn how to write, I was also trying to make stories based on the words that I knew. So definitely, I think that the beauty of writing and trying to shape stories is something that often start in childhood, and it's beautiful when growing up you're able to actually make this a career. And what was the
So interesting that, somewhere in our hardwired, in our brains and in our chemistry, there are proclivities. There are definitely proclivities. I never related to numbers. Numbers never really made a lot of sense to me. The numbers never corresponded to ideas that made sense in the world, but words, from a very early age, it was clear I was a writer by nature. And it's so interesting that human beings emerge that way and their skills emerge that way. We really need to think about that and nurture children and give them rewards for the things that they're good at, because we need talented people of all kinds in the world.
I agree, and thank you for saying that. I truly believe that, like you said, in education, emphasizing the strengths of children is something that is key, because we cannot feel fit in the same mold and then just be right. Emphasize the strength of people. I think that's a beautiful way of saying that. And when you started working as a speechwriter, like what was, because you came from a journalism background, and what was your first, or I would say the biggest challenge that you were facing when you started that career or transition from a journalist?
Well, initially it was hard to get my head around writing as an advocate for someone else, because when you're a journalist, there is an ethic that you are trying to be fair and balanced and equal. At least in American journalism, in the journalism tradition that I grew up in, it wasn't partisan. It was mainstream journalism, and we really tried to be balanced and fair. So if we represented one point of view, we always represented the other point of view. If we It was very critical to have what we call a nut graph. That is a paragraph in the article that gives a bird's eye view or a contextual view of the situation. And when you go into speech writing, it operates a little differently. Yes, you still need context. Yes, you still need a breadth of a vision or view for your audience so they can understand the issue, the topic that you're talking about. But it is an advocacy job. It really is not meant to be fair and balanced. You are writing for someone else. Just like if you're a lawyer, you're representing someone's point of view. Just like if you're an interior designer and you're decorating someone's house or bedroom according to their tastes, according to their point of view or their perceptions, they're hiring you to be an advocate. So it's the same way with speechwriting. It's a form of public relations. And initially that was the biggest transition for me, the biggest thing I had to come to terms with.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's quite. I like the comparison you made. About like being the interior designer of writing. I would say, because, but definitely you have to embrace. And I'm a speechwriter myself, and one of the biggest challenge I see is, beside the fact, like you said, to advocate for someone else, is to build trust with the client. I think, because the more the client trusts you, and the more he or she will be willing to share things that will give more, I would say, more weight and more depth to the speech. How do you build trust with your clients?
Well, everybody's different, and I think a speechwriter really needs to be sensitive to all the different styles of bosses, of clients, of principals that are going to hire you. Some want a lot of contact, some want very little contact. Some want to give you, a lot of information and have you respond to it, and some want you to approach them with a lot of information so they can respond to it. So you really need to be very flexible in your stylistic approach and in the way you interact with your client, because everybody has a different way of building trust and of accepting the speechwriter into their circle of intimates, you might say, because a speechwriter is a very intimate position. A speechwriter is someone who gives words, gives voice and ideas to an individual, and that can be, with the wrong dynamic, and can be threatening. So it's the building of trust is really critical, as you point out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have the trust, and also I always wonder when I'm reading speeches or when I'm writing myself. There is one thing that I always try to do is to not put too much of myself, because there's this tendency that when we're writing. And I want to ask you, you're a very experienced speechwriter, and how did you manage to make sure that you remain an advocate of the voice of your client only, or does part of your personality always comes through the speeches? Like, how do you manage that balance?
Well, it's hard to answer that in a black and white way. It's different with every client. You are being hired to bring your thoughtfulness, your knowledge, your depth of understanding, your organizational skills. I mean, ability to organize material. So that's what you're being hired for. That's your job. On the other hand, you have to be sensitive to your speaker's personality and desires. And look, let's be clear. Not every speechwriter is a good match for every speaker. Sometimes you go into a situation and you realize right away it's not a good match, and you have to say, I don't think this is going to work out. But a sophisticated speechwriter does know how to adapt to the style of the speaker. That's part of the job. You have to do it. And by the way, it's not black and white. What works with one person doesn't work with another person. The older you get and the more experienced you get, I think the better you're able to navigate those situations. I think it can be hard for very young people just starting out who don't have a lot of sophistication about the dynamics between a boss and a worker bee. That can be difficult. So it requires maturity. I would say in general, more speechwriters than not tend to be older, tend to have some mileage on them, because it does require maturity.
Thanks. And I would like to get to the nitty gritty of speech writing. What do
By
you?
the way,
Yes.
I want to show you my mug. I just noticed.
Oh, I'd rather be speechifying. I like it. That's a great
It
one.
doesn't say speech writing, but it says speechifying. And that's a good transition to our next topic, because I'm a big advocate of speech in general. I believe that the spoken word is extremely powerful. It conveys ideas, it conveys knowledge, it conveys emotion.
Yes.
So I'm a big advocate of the spoken word, of all of us finding our voices and putting our voices into the world.
Yes, because like you said, I think that great speech writing is important, of course, but then also, the ability of delivering a great speech. You can have a great speech written, but then it's really about like being also able to deliver. So to you, what makes a good speech? What are the three things that make a good speech? And then the second question to that will be, what do you think are essential things to deliver a great speech?
You ask complicated questions.
I do.
Three things. Tell me three things that make a good speech. Well, I think
Yeah.
the first part of your question and the second part of your question might be very similar, the same. But three things that make a good speech. One, I think, is passion. You have to have passion for your topic. What does that mean? It means you can't stand up and speak dryly and factually without feeling or enthusiasm or passion, you can call it passion, and expect your audience to get excited. Just remember this: the audience is never going to be more excited than you are about a topic. They're not. They're going to take their cue from you. So if you demonstrate enthusiasm, if you demonstrate how much you care about this topic, the audience picks up on that. It's not subtle. They get it and they respond to that. The second thing I think you need is authenticity. What does that mean? That's a word that gets tossed around a lot, but it means you have to convey that you are in the game, that this comes from you, that the stakes mean something to you. It's either your research, your findings, your your ideas, they come from you. And the first two I think are combined. The authenticity and the passion come from the same source generally. And what is the third thing? Gee, you really put me on the spot.
Sorry about that.
I don't know. I mean, I'm going to just put this out there, but I think structure is really important. It's really critical that you lead your audience through a structure that they can follow. It's not easy to listen. It is not easy to sit in the audience and absorb ideas and take them in and understand them. You need to be very clear and succinct, and you need to lead your audience through very carefully a sequence that your audience can follow and absorb. That means not giving too much information at the front. That means starting the speech in a way that draws the audience in, because if you lose them at the beginning, it's very hard to get them back. So paying attention to the structure, to how you deliver the material is critical.
Thank you. And yes, structure I think is also very key. Like you said, if you lose them at the beginning, it's over. And I really like what you said about not oversharing. I think this is something that is very important, especially when we are passionate. We want to say so many things, but then we have also to be mindful of not overloading people with information. So thank you for sharing that. And
Well, the information is key. Information is the meat of of any speech, but you have to deliver it in a way that the audience can take it in. Most people in the audience are sitting there, and in their minds they're thinking, is she a good speaker? Why is she wearing that color? Where are the bathrooms? What time is the lunch? Why is my phone buzzing? They have a million reasons not to be paying attention to the content that you are delivering. A million reasons, more than ever now today. Very hard to get an audience away from their cell phones. So it's your job as a speaker to grab their attention and keep it.
yeah.
Not easy.
No, definitely not. And you talked also about authenticity, which I think is also definitely one of the key and for when you're a speaker. And I want to pinpoint on that because I think that a lot of people, especially introvert speakers, feel that they have to become someone else in order to get the attention of the audience. So could you please elaborate, when you talk about authenticity, especially for introverted speakers, what advice will you give to them?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what authenticity is. It's like the magic spice or ingredients that everybody says you need to put into the pot, but defining what it is different for every person. But I would say the biggest advice I give to people is not to speak from a script. Not to speak from a script. So I'm looking for here, I'll show you. This is my key tool as a speaker and as a speechwriter. It's an index card. I buy these by the dozens. They're very inexpensive. Cost me $1.50 at the drugstore. And I put on here bullet points of the points that I want to make. Just a word or two. And then I have it in front of me. And I look at it, I glance at it to keep my thoughts in order and to make sure I'm going in the right order, but I don't read from a script. Beginners read from scripts and they sound wooden and they sound hollow and they don't sound authentic. So this is a key tool to use when you're preparing your speech and when you're delivering it. When you're preparing your speech, you can have long sentences here and then look down and look at your notes. But as you go along, as you rehearse your speech, and rehearsal is key, you condense them and distill them until you get to the point where you just need a word or two to remind you of what you want to say. And then when you're standing up to speak, nobody minds if you have a piece of paper in front of you. If you're, it's best not to speak at a podium, but if you're standing in front of an audience, you can have a piece of paper like this. If you want to be less distracting, you can color it black so people don't notice the white so much, but you just glance down, you look at a few words and you say, now I know what point I want to talk about. And when you use your own words, even if they don't come out perfect, even if you come out and you stumble, even if you forget a word and have to go back and correct yourself, that's authenticity. That sounds like a real person and not a robot.
Love the definition. And what you said also about one thing I always tell people is that if you forget a word that you used to say when you were rehearsing, nobody will know because it will be the first time that people are listening to it. So don't be afraid. And it's true that learning by heart can really be tricky sometimes, because if you miss one word, then your head start spiraling, and then it becomes very complicated. So thank you. I think it's a very good tip that you shared, how to prepare. And because a lot of time people talk about the notes card while you are presenting, but I think it's the first time that I hear someone talking about preparing with the note card and eliminating words. So I think what
Rehearsing.
reversing,
This is
yes,
a key rehearsal trick
yes.
or aid tool.
Definitely, that's really good. And in your introduction, I talked about your role as high school speech debate judge, and I want to talk about this for a bit, But how do you think how important do you think it is to have speech education for high schoolers and kids in general?
Oh, I think it's critical. It's so critical. I think every high school, junior high, high school, should have a program that teaches uh, young people how to present their ideas. You can't do anything in life if you don't know how to stand up and speak. And I'm not talking about just giving speeches. I'm talking about walking into into a dry cleaners and saying, this is what I want to do, this is what the problem is. If you can't organize your ideas and stand and deliver them, you're not going to be effective as an advocate in any form in life. So you need to be able to stand up, speak, present your ideas, and make sure that the other person standing across from you understands them. And it's not a skill that comes naturally to every kid. Some kids it does, but other kids need help. Now, debate is a very, very critical way, a helpful way that many kids learn to rigorously prepare their arguments. And it's beautiful because in the kind of debate that I coach and judge, it's called in the United States, it's called Lincoln Douglas. There's a one side and there's another side, and the students have to prepare both sides. And they don't know till the last minute whether they're going to represent one side or the other side of an argument. And that also teaches them that there are two sides to an argument and that every side has some legitimacy, if you will, in the argument. But debate is not the only way to learn these schools. Other schools also have speech programs, they have storytelling programs. So debate is very helpful, but there's many different ways to teach these skills.
And when you're working with the young people, what are the skills that you are teaching them right away? What are the things that you emphasize on?
Well, I think thinking on your feet is critical. I think when you are inexperienced, whether you're younger or you're just inexperienced, or maybe you're introverted, or maybe you have a stutter, or maybe you have a speech impediment. There are a lot of people in that situation, and you don't like speaking, or you're disinclined to speak for whatever reason. Very often, people think they have to map out in their head what they're going to say before they say it. But with experience, you can learn to think on your feet. What does that mean, on your feet? Well, clearly, I'm not on my feet. I'm sitting down. But it's an expression in English that we use for thinking as you speak. That means you don't have every sentence worked out before you say it. As you express yourself, as the words are coming out of the mouth, the words are working in concert with your brain. And I believe that everybody has the ability to do it, but you need to learn it. You practice it. You need to have experience doing it to sharpen your skills. And it's critical, as I said, for every walk of life, whether you're working for someone else, whether you're working with teams, whether you're working advocating for a cause, whether you're in a house of worship and you're speaking to your community, whatever context or situation you find yourself in life, you need to be able to speak extemporaneously. You need to be able to think on your feet.
Definitely. I remember when I was living in Istanbul, I joined Toastmasters, and my favorite part of the meetings was the table topics. table topics for the people who don't know. Toastmaster, first of all, is a public speaking club. And if you are interested in learning about public speaking, I recommend that you join one because it's really helpful. And besides learning how to do speeches and delivering speeches, we learn also how to do impromptu speech. And table topics was definitely that moment of the session of the when you had to talk for 1 minute minimum about a topic. And you're absolutely right. For some people, it comes easy, but for some people, it's definitely a struggle at the beginning. But then, as you go along and as you practice, it becomes something I would say enjoyable, and that comes very handy in life situation. You need to be quick on your feet, to think on your feet, because you have to the world we live in. You have to anticipate.
You're a fellow Toastmaster. I love Toastmasters, and that's where I learned to speak impromptu. For those who don't know, Toastmasters is an international nonprofit that is dedicated to promoting leadership through public speaking. And wherever you live in the world, there is a Toastmasters club near
Yes.
you. You can join. You can go to meetings, breakfast, lunch, dinner. You have your choice of various clubs, and that's where to go to learn how to do, as you say, table topics, impromptu speaking, get good on your feet. So, yes, we have that in common, Jennifer.
Yeah, and I really enjoy that. It was definitely like one of the highlights of my weeks because you get to meet people coming from so many different walks of life, and for 2 hours you share the passion of public speaking, and then you go have drink. I had a tradition. I started a tradition in my club was to have French fries afterwards. It was so random, but I think I have really cherished those memories. I'm glad
So,
that.
when I come to Bordeaux, we'll go to a Toastmasters together.
Yeah, well, actually, there's no Toastmaster club in Bordeaux. Can you believe that?
That's you. You got it. That's your job. You have to start one.
I know. People have told me that many times. So I might do it eventually. But yeah, definitely. Okay, if you're coming to Bordeaux, I will make sure that there will be a Toastmasters club to welcome you. Now it's on record. I can't back it up. But no, that's wonderful. And we're talking about, like I said in the intro, one of the thing that is really important to you. One of your mission, throughout your platform, Speaking While Female, Speech Bank, is to empower women speaking, and to also, like I said, giving a light and shedding a light on all those great speeches delivered and written by women that kind of been forgotten in history. And I want to also talk about like in high school, and because I think that part of it is this tendency that we see in education of that not having the tendency for women, especially girls, not to speak up. In the work you do with youngsters, is it a tendency that you see, or do you see that change? How would you comment on that?
Well, I think this is how I would characterize it. And of course, I'm in the United States. I can't speak for women
Of course.
elsewhere, really. But I would say that still today, it is harder for most women, and I'll include young women, girls, young women, to speak than it is for most men. It is
Okay.
still harder. And there's a variety of reasons because we are acculturated to be quiet. We are acculturated not to put our ideas into the world. We don't have a lot of role models for that. And we get criticized more when we do step up and speak. We're criticized because of the tone of our voice, because of what we're wearing, because of how we say things. There's just misogyny is a real thing, anti-woman sentiments. However, I would say that here in the United States, from what I've seen, the situation is obviously changing for the better. Younger people, younger women are emboldened, are more confident speaking out, and that warms my heart. It really shows me that societies do change in profound ways. And my hope is that for my children's generation, my grandchildren's generation, and generations to come, we will continue to see this shift until the day that we have an equal number of women and men sharing their views in the public realm or the public square. But we're definitely not there yet. It is still undeniable that it is harder for women than men. Now, I don't know what the situation's like in where you live in France. Maybe you can tell me what you have seen.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I think that in general, we are not taught as women to speak up. I was quite fortunate because my background is in sports. So, I was playing tennis, and it's a sport, we were all together, and it gives you confidence. And the confidence that I got on the tennis court, actually, I was able to carry it, in school or in class. I was always quite vocal, and I was always very comfortable. But then you're right. I see that very often, especially when I work with female entrepreneurs or even my friends, that they are very afraid to speak up. And I was always this kind of naughty girl that was always speaking her mind, for better or worse. But I think it's something important that, even though, like you said, the misogyny is real, more and more, I think I see that all over the world, women have always been vocal, and they've all been speaking, and it's just getting better and better. And for me, I'm quite optimistic, and I believe that the young generation. I see my nieces; they are very vocal. They're not afraid of speaking, and so I think that there is a long way to go still. When you go, we see it all the time in debates on TV or at work when you are interrupted. But it's also important, I would say, to speak up. And when this happened, to in a assertive way of saying, I'm not finished, which I've done many times. Because you start talking, and then your manager interrupts you, and you say no. And then I even ask, why, when my male colleague is speaking, you're not interrupting him, but when I'm speaking, you always interrupt me. Like, I'm bold like that. And I think it changes, and sometimes people don't even realize. And then you also have to educate, because I also think that some people are used to do that because they've seen that and think it's normal. And then you have to say, hey, stop, like you would train a kid, basically. And then things change quite quickly. I think also that there is a willingness from both sides to actually help each other. And I had also very supportive male colleague that would also tell me, hey, Jennifer was also saying something. So I think that it's really something that I hope will be not even a discussion topic in years from now. But like you said, there's a long way to go. And yeah, so let's talk about your research and your work on women's speeches. Like I said, you're starting the platform, Speaking While Female Speech Bank. And I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the book also, and the original story that was the catalyst. I've heard in a previous interview you mentioned reading that book, about.
I have it here. I have it here
Yeah.
somewhere. Oh, wait.
Okay.
No, I don't see it right now. I can tell you about it.
Yeah, no worries. Though. But and I like what you were saying about how sometimes anger can be a trigger, like for positive change. So could you tell us more about what was the original story of writing the Speaking While
Right.
Female?
Well, thank you for asking. I was, of course, I was a speechwriter and very focused on speech and oratory, and rhetoric. And I started noticing that in the speeches that I was seeing, especially as a judge, we mentioned the speech writing contest that I judge for every year, so many quotations by Churchill, Winston Churchill, the British leader during World War II, and then Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, and Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy, and Barack Obama. And I thought, where are all the women? Almost nobody quotes a woman. Nobody quotes a woman. So I pulled down from my shelf a copy of William Sapphire's Lend Me Your Ears. It's around here somewhere, but I don't know where. I've got it around here somewhere. And it's a classic book, very popular. It's gone into several printings, several editions. If you go around to leaders' offices, you'll very often see a copy on the shelves. William Sapphire was a very distinguished speechwriter himself. He wrote for President Nixon and for Vice President Agnew in the United States, but he was also a columnist for the New York Times, just a very esteemed person. And he put together this anthology, Lend Me Your Ears, Of course, the phrase "lend me your ears" comes from William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. So I looked at this book, I opened it up, and it had something like, I don't know, 250 speeches from all over the world, from across time, and there were, I think, 27 by women. And I don't have the exact figures, but that was 20 something compared to 200. So that was the trigger, because I just got so angry. I thought, something is wrong with this picture. Something is terribly wrong with this picture. If this man, who is so educated and who I respect so much and have so much esteem for intellectually, completely missed the picture, completely missed women's contributions. And that's what got me started. It was anger. I always say, first I got angry, and then I got busy.
I like that. Yeah, I think that it's something that, and I liked what you said, that every time, I mean, and it's not just an American thing, like even in France, we always show Martin Luther King speeches, Winston Churchill, like these are figures that we know, because they are all the ones, and Barack Obama and Abraham Lincoln. These are really figures that, when it comes to speech writing, great speeches, John Fitzgerald Kennedy as well. These are the people, and you never see women. And what is crazy, when I was preparing the interview and getting interested in your work, was that people have accepted that. And I have to be honest, like even myself, before, until a few months ago, I was just like, yeah, oh yeah, that's, yeah, a speech, yeah, Martin Luther King. But then, what about the woman? And so I think that your book is definitely a great way to start a conversation. And so I skimmed through it, and I wanted to talk about some of the speeches that actually really sparked my interest. The first one was about, so with my
Here's the
communication.
book.
Yeah.
This is the new edition. This is the old edition. You can see it has the first edition. It has white
Yes.
lettering, but the brand new one that's just come out is got gold lettering. And just so your audience knows, this is a book about American women from the United States. Someday maybe I'll do a volume worldwide, but for now this is the United States. But there are lots of speeches by women from France, and you're all over Europe, on my companion resource, which is an online speech bank for women. It's called speakingwhilefemale.co, and there you'll find lots and lots and lots of speeches by women from Europe, from India, from South America, from Asia, from Southeast Asia. So it is a global endeavor that I've undertaken
Yeah, and
to
thank you for
to raise our awareness, really, to raise our awareness about the role of women speakers in history.
Yeah, I think it's an essential work, because when we go on the website, we see that you have this infographic, and then you see the proportion, like we discussed before, not just about the William Safire book, but in general. And you see the proportion of like male speeches versus women speeches, and it's just like, wow, it's insane. And then so thank you for doing that work, because definitely I think that people will need to learn more. And I truly believe that the more people would be talking about women's speeches in history, and not just, like you said, in America, but all over the world, people will realize and actually start quoting women, because I think it's also lack of resource and mental laziness. So you have, like you said, continuously raising awareness. And like I said, one of the
But just so your audience knows, what I did was I went and bought or got from the library, found online, speech anthologies from all over the world in the English language.
okay,
There are quite a few in other languages, but I didn't attempt that. But just in the English language, books from the United States, Canada, of course, Great Britain, various countries in Africa, South Africa, Philippines, India, anywhere, Ireland, anywhere they published in English, I looked at them and I put them all in an infographic, and there's, I think, 230 anthologies. And then I noted how many speeches by women and how many speeches by men. And when you look at that, you can see at a glance that the history of speech has been recorded as a male endeavor.
Yeah.
when so many women have been ignored. So if you want to find that infographic that you referred to, go to the Speaking While Female Speech Bank, speakingwhilefemale.co. And then on the home page, you'll see a link to that infographic. It says, here you can see how women's voices have been ignored in history, and you'll find that page.
Yes, and we definitely share, all the information in the description of the episode, so then people can definitely like go there, make sure that they don't miss it, because it's truly important. And yeah, so one of the speeches from so excuse my accent, Sojourner Truth, I will
You
say.
said it right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. All right. And yeah, it's interesting because there were two speeches from her in your book. The first one that actually was not delivered by her, but that a lot of people thought that she was the author of it, Ain't I a Woman? And the one, I Am Woman's Right. And I want to read a passage that I thought was quite interesting to me. And it's when she said, I've heard the Bible and have learned that Eve caused man to sin. Well, if woman upset the world, do give her a chance to set it right side up again. And that was, to me, I thought that it was brilliant, because it's really about, okay, let women speak. For me, it was really what I when I read that, I was like, how brilliant this is, of having, turning the, okay, we're blaming on women, which tend to happen quite often, but then if you don't give us a voice, um how can we actually make things right? I thought it was brilliant. And what was your the reason why you picked that speech among one
Well,
of them?
first of all, it's iconic in American history, throughout American history. And it's also very, I guess you would say, it's not controversial, it's complicated. Because the original version, which was first, well, to be clear, she delivered the speech in 1851 at a women's conference.
Yeah.
And right after that, her friend, who was a publisher, published it in his paper, in his newspaper, but not that many people noticed it. He published what we think of, what historians think of as the more accurate version. But 12 years later, there was another woman who, with good intentions, I have to say, she was an abolitionist, she was against slavery, she was promoting Sojourner Truth. She published a book about Sojourner Truth in which she included a version of the speech that was very different. Now, why did she change the language? I don't, I'm not a scholar of history, but the language that she used was a kind of caricature of how some people thought black people spoke in the South, in the South of the United States. And Sojourner Truth was not from the South. She was from New York, upstate New York. In fact, she didn't speak like that at all. She would have spoken with, she originally spoke a form of Dutch, Low Dutch, because this northern part of the United States had been settled by the Dutch. So in giving her this Southern accent, this stereotypical Southern black accent, she was trading on racist stereotypes of what Southern blacks would be like. And so her version was accepted, and it became immensely popular. I mean, soldiers learned it, school children learned it, and they learned it as a way of taking pride in Sojourner Truth. She was always lionized. She was always, revered for her role in history. But the version of her speech that was accepted was not the true version, and it employed or made use of stereotypes that we now clearly recognize were unfair to her identity and unfair to her identity as a black woman. So now in the year 2023, which version do we accept? Which one do we champion? Both have a place in history. And I think the debate is quite instructive for how we think about the past and how we think about the role of various people played in championing her and in making her, and giving her the iconic role that she has. So for that reason, I included both versions. I think school children, everyone should be aware that there were two versions, and be able to read them both and compare them and hear the story.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for providing the context. I think it's quite important, and especially nowadays. You mentioned, that you mentioned Frances Gabe, I think was the name of the abolitionist. Who, yes, and that she was doing with good intent, and sometimes even still today. Black women still have, to go under the stereotype, and it's important to be able to see her in our journey to reclaiming a voice and to be able to speak up. So that's also why, in general, to be able to say that, okay, well, you might be. I'm dealing with the stereotypes, but it's also important to, regardless of what's happening, to kind of reclaim your voice. So that's why also I wanted to select that speech, and then there was also related to, I believe, the work you do with the high school students. I came across Emma Willard, improving female education speech, and I thought that it was also a very interesting one. The for the context, it was about doing, I will believe, university seminaries, female seminaries, and one of the line, I'm paraphrasing, but what I really liked was, improving female character will elevate the whole character of the community. And I think that this is still relevant today. And the speech was quite brilliant in highlighting how, encouraging women to get education is actually great for society, because they are the ones, traditionally taking care of the children, so they will be the one in contact. And I believe that, even nowadays we are still dealing with some polemics sometimes about the importance of not of female education, and even though, and I believe that the speech was, also, it was in 1819, if I'm
18,
correct.
14, 18, 19, yeah. And you know what's so interesting? It's really important, if you're going to look at items from history, to put them in their context, and to realize that you can't just say, in a facile way or a simplistic way, Dana Barker Gage was a racist, when clearly she was way out ahead, among the most radical people of her time, at a time when people saw, white people tended to see black people in a very pejorative way. She was in the forefront. She was, out there speaking. She was a speaker too, and promoting Sojourner Truth. So people who say simplistically she was a racist are really doing a disservice to history, to everybody in history. And then Emma Willard, she was outraged that she couldn't go to college like her brothers. So she wanted to educate women and give them the educational opportunities that her brothers had. But Emma Willard did not propose to teach public speaking in her academy, and she was not an advocate of women having the vote. She did not, so she was a woman of her time. She was a woman of her time. All these people are of their time. So we really have to not impose, we have to use our values, our morality, our ethics when we look at these people and decide who we want to champion and who we don't want to champion. But we also, at the same time, have to put them in their historical context and appreciate what was going on at the time. So I really thank you for paying such close attention, because Emma Willard is one of my favorites, and she was just an astonishingly courageous and forward-thinking educator. So one of my favorites. So thank you.
Yeah, oh, you're welcome. And I can wait to discover many more speeches, because it was hard to pick from, and I'm sure for you it was difficult to select 75 speeches, because, like you said,
Oh, terrible.
many women spoke in history, and then it has to come to 75. But then there will probably be a following edition or
I
a
could
book.
easily, I could easily rattle off the names of 25 more that I wanted to put in the book. So Jennifer, here's a challenge for you.
Ooh,
I think you should publish this book for women in France. 75 speeches by extraordinary French women. And I will help you. So I'm laying down a challenge now.
Okay,
Because
you know.
there were women in France that were speaking in the Middle Ages. There were women in France who were speaking during the French Revolution. In the 1780s, there were women in France who were speaking during the Paris Commune. There have been women in France who have changed the history of France and the world with their voices, and they are too little understood and appreciated. So that is a project that we can work on together. How's that?
Oh wow, that's great. I mean, you know, I will always be an athlete at art. So an athlete, it's hard for me to refuse a challenge. So definitely, well, yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for offering that. And yeah, we'll definitely be talking about it again because you're right. I think there's so many.
That book needs to be done, and
Yeah.
you are the perfect person to do it, and I am the perfect person to help you do it.
Wow, I love it.
My French is not good enough, and I'm not a French person, so I can't claim any special insight. But if you look at the Speaking Well Female Speech Bank, you'll find tons of French women throughout history who have, as I said, changed the world by stepping up and speaking out.
That's amazing, and thank you for saying that. And with your work and your words, you're empowering so many women, and I'm sure men as well, to take a closer look at at such history that, like I said, forgotten history. And as a speaker, because you also get to, as an author, but you get to speak a lot. I'm sure on corporate events. What are I would say the let me rephrase. As a public speaker, um, how comfortable, first of all, are you with public speaking, and what are the tips that you will give to someone who's also very passionate about a topic to get started in such endeavor?
Well, I love speaking in public. Thank you for asking. It's become a joy. I've gone from being terrified when I started Toastmasters 20 years ago to now really enjoying it. And I also make my living as a public speaker too. So I earn income from speaking. It's an important profession too. But as for tips, the main tip I have is practice, practice, practice. Go to Toastmasters. Look around your community. Speak at your house of worship. Speak to the nonprofits in your area. Go seek out opportunities to speak. Go to school board meetings and city council meetings and share your point of view. Every time you stand up and speak, you get more confident, more self-assured, and so there's no substitute for experience.
Thank you so much. Dana, we're coming to the end of the interview, and I really want to thank you so much for all the gems that you've been sharing. And I would like to ask you, what are your upcoming projects? What you are working on?
What am I working on now? Well, I'm working on another book about Jewish voices. But it's not going to be speeches. It's not going to be like this one, speeches. It's going to be quotations,
All
books
right.
by Jews throughout. And, this book starts at 1637. That book starts 4,000 years ago because Jewish history is almost 4,000 years old. But Jewish people from all over the world, from every country in the world, various sayings, anecdotes, quotations about culture, about religion, about history, about the search for meaning, about doing good in the world, about making the world a better place. So I'm really immersed in the world of voice, not just women's voice, but human voice. So I hope I'll have further opportunities to write and do other books that are all about what it means to have a voice and to use your voice.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inspiring us to speak and to share our thoughts, and yeah, and for giving voice, like I said in the beginning, to other people. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure.